Vanessa Crowell stood across the street and watched the fire eat her neighbor's cabin. The deed, the cameras, the complaint file, everything that could hurt her was inside. 3 weeks later, she walked into court to claim the burned lot. The door behind the bench opened. Elijah Carter stepped out in a black robe. The whole room rose. "Chief Judge Elijah Carter presiding." Her folder hit the floor. She had looked him up once. She had stopped looking too soon. Where had he kept the evidence when the house itself was ash? The cabin sat on 11 acres of Colorado foothill that had belonged to the Carter family since before anyone thought to build a gated community around it. Elijah's father had cut and set the beams himself over the course of 2 summers, and 30-odd years later, the place still smelled faintly of cedar when the afternoon sun hit the south wall. Westbriar Estates had grown up around that parcel on 3 sides, close enough that Elijah could hear his neighbor's sprinklers, but the land had its own access road off the county highway, its own deed and a boundary line recorded downtown in ink that predated every house on the ridge. It had never been part of the association. It had never needed to be. Inside the walls held the things Elijah could not have replaced. His wedding photograph hung in the hallway slightly crooked because Maya had bumped it at 7 and he had never straightened it. A shoebox in the closet held the letters Rachel had written him during the 8 months she spent in treatment before she died, and a wooden chair his father had built sat by the wood stove, sized for a child who had long since outgrown it. On the kitchen door frame, a column of pencil marks tracked Maya's height from age 4 upward, each one dated in his careful hand. Maya was 12 now, and most nights she did her homework at the kitchen table while he made dinner and asked her the same 3 questions about her day. She drew constantly, and almost every drawing was the same house with 3 people standing in front of it. Elijah kept copies of the best ones in a safe deposit box at the bank in town, which struck her as a strange thing to do with a picture, and which he explained the only way he knew how. "What matters isn't the walls, sweetheart," he told her once. "It's what we manage to keep inside ourselves." He was a patient man by temperament and had become a more patient one by trade. He wrote things down. He kept receipts. When something went wrong, he tended to wait a beat longer than most people before responding, which some mistook for slowness, and others eventually recognized as the opposite. His work was a subject he handled lightly with neighbors. The court's public directory listed him as E.M. Carter Chambers' assignment, beside a portrait photograph taken years earlier and never updated. He had been the chief judge of the Silver Ridge County District Court for 7 months, having transferred over from Larimer County the previous spring, and he had never once mentioned it on his own street. When Maya was small, she had called him Judge Dad in front of a cashier at the hardware store, and he had knelt down afterward and asked her gently not to say it outside the house. Not because it was a secret, because he wanted her to be somebody's daughter before she was a judge's daughter, and he knew how quickly the second thing swallowed the first. Vanessa Crowell had moved into the estate 10 months before all of this began, into the largest house on the North Curve, and had been elected president of the Homeowners Association within half a year of arriving. She was gracious in the specific way of people who have learned that graciousness travels further than force. She said community often and our shared investment, and she smiled at everyone. She had in fact looked Elijah up. Early on, curious about the parcel that interrupted her subdivision, she typed his name into the county court's website and found the line reading E.M. Carter Judicial Chambers. A clerk then. Filing. Records. She closed the tab. "I checked on him," she told Paige Hollis over coffee. "He does paperwork for the courthouse. That's all he is." She never opened it again. There was more to find, and it was not hidden, and she did not look, because the answer she already had fit comfortably against everything she had decided about the man in the cedar cabin with the gravel driveway and the dented pickup. What she wanted was a clubhouse. Not a room with folding chairs, but a proper one-restaurant pool event lawn and overlooked terrace facing west toward the range. She had the drawings printed at full size, and on the master site plan she had circled a rectangle in red pen. The rectangle sat on the southern portion of Elijah Carter's land because that was the only ground on the ridge with the view and the grade the design required. Completed, the project would lift her own property value by something close to $1 million. By the time she circled it in red, she had already signed with Bridgeline Development and paid a deposit out of the association's reserve fund. The contract carried a groundbreaking date of November 1st. Miss it, and the deposit was gone. She had also taken a second mortgage on her house to cover her personal stake betting on a number that only existed if the clubhouse got built. And the association's annual audit was scheduled for December, which meant that if there was no groundbreaking, there would be questions about money that had already left the account. Paige Hollis was the treasurer, and Vanessa had arranged things so that Paige's name was on all of it. The surveyor's invoice, the association credit card, the purchase orders Paige signed. Paige authorized, Paige's handwriting sat at the bottom of every page. Vanessa framed this as trust. "We're in the same boat now, honey," she said, and patted the younger woman's wrist, and Paige laughed the way people laugh when they have not yet worked out what they just heard. Across the road from the Carters lived Walter Keene, retired from 30 years as an electrical technician who could identify half the vehicles in the neighborhood by sound alone and complained regularly about the heat shield rattling on one of the association's maintenance trucks. Harold Gans, who had run the HOA before Vanessa remembered clearly that no board had ever claimed a single foot of the Carter parcel. Most other residents said nothing about anything, having watched what happened to the ones who did. Elijah photographed every letter the association sent him and backed the images up to a server in another state. It was not paranoia so much as habit. He had spent his professional life watching cases turn on whether somebody had kept a piece of paper. The habit simply extended to his own front door. The first real trouble came on a Tuesday in September when Vanessa walked onto his property with 2 board members and a clipboard without calling ahead. The fence was non-compliant, she said. The shed was depressing the neighborhood's valuation. The pickup could not be parked in front of the house. The gravel drive would need to be replaced with association standard pavers. Elijah listened to all of it, then asked her to show him the provision that gave the association authority over land it did not govern. She did not have one. What she had instead was a phrase delivered with total confidence that any home visible from within Westbriar Estates fell under the board's extended community oversight, a term that appeared in no statute, no covenant, and no bylaw ever adopted by that association or any other. Maya came up the driveway from the bus while they were still standing there, and she stopped when she saw strangers walking her yard with a measuring wheel. Vanessa glanced at her and then said to Elijah, but loudly enough, that the house simply did not suit the neighborhood. That night, Maya carried her box of drawings down to the kitchen and set it on the table between them, and told her father she wanted him to take it somewhere else. He said there was no need. She said it again and did not move the box, and stood there with her jaw set in an expression he recognized from her mother's face. He drove it to the bank on Thursday. The first fine arrived the following morning, $250 for refusal of property inspection. 3 days later, it tripled. A week after that came a letter threatening a lien and following the lien forced sale. Elijah wrote back once. He sent a demand that the harassment cease and enclosed a copy of the recorded deed, the county plat map, and the boundary certification. It was 4 pages, and every page was polite. Vanessa read it aloud at the next board meeting and then tore it in half in front of 40 residents. She called him a low-level employee, a man playing at understanding the law, a selfish holdout obstructing the future of an entire community. "I looked him up," she said. "He does paperwork for the court." What does a man who does paperwork know about law? Elijah heard about it that evening from Walter, who repeated the line twice because he could not get over it. He could have ended the whole thing in an afternoon. One phone call, one letter on court stationery, and the association would have collapsed backwards so fast it would have taken the fence dispute with it. He thought about it seriously, standing at his kitchen window with Maya's height marks a foot from his shoulder. But a judge who uses the bench to win a private fight has spent something he cannot earn back. Every HOA case, every property dispute, every neighbor-against-neighbor filing that came before him for the rest of his career would carry the question of whether he had done it again. He would have to recuse himself from the entire category of dispute permanently, and he would deserve to. So he chose the other road. He did not disclose, he did not pay, he did not raise his voice. He recorded dates, photographed damage-logged license plates, noted the hours association vehicles appeared on his access road, and kept the name of whoever had signed each notice. Vanessa took his silence for weakness and moved forward accordingly. Elijah took her letters for what they were, which was the beginning of a sequence. That night, he squared the torn demand letters carbon copy into a manila folder, wrote the date in the corner, and slid it into the drawer beneath his desk where 4 identical folders were already waiting. The folders multiplied through late September. A fine for the color of his roof, which had been that color since before Vanessa owned a house in Colorado. A fine for the height of the pines along the north line. A fine for parking in his own driveway. A fine for failing to display the association's emblem flag, which he had never been given and could not have been required to fly. A fine for the shed described in writing as inconsistent with the landscape. Then the sign went up on his lawn, 40 feet inside his own boundary, reading "Property under Association Enforcement" in letters visible from the county road. Maintenance trucks began parking across his access lane in the mornings so that he had to wait or reverse a quarter mile. Someone cut the limbs off 2 of his pines from the association side and left the branches where they fell. A load of broken concrete appeared against his fence. A letter went out to every household on the ridge, advising residents that association personnel had reported feeling unsafe on the Carter property and should not enter alone. That was the one that told Elijah where this was going. The fines were about money, and the sign was about pressure. But the letter was about him, about installing an idea of him in 400 heads at once. The rumors moved faster than the letters. He was hiding something. A man that private usually is. Somebody had heard he'd had trouble with the law once, though nobody could say when or what kind, and the vagueness was the point. 2 neighbors who had waved at him for years stopped waving. A woman at the mailboxes turned her cart around when she saw him coming. At school, a boy in Maya's grade asked her whether her dad was a criminal. She told Elijah at dinner, holding her fork and not eating. He set down the dish towel and sat across from her and did not immediately answer, which she had learned meant he was choosing his words rather than avoiding them. "We're not going to answer every lie," he said. "There isn't time and it doesn't work. But we're going to keep everything that can prove the truth, and we're going to keep it somewhere they can't reach." On a Saturday morning at the end of September, Maya came in from the mailbox and said there was a white pickup at the end of the service road and that the person inside hadn't gotten out. She had taken a picture of it because it seemed strange to her. He looked at the photograph on her phone, a white truck at the tree line, no plate visible at that distance, time-stamped the 28th. "Keep doing that," he said. "Don't go near it, just from the window." She took 2 more over the following weeks on different days at different hours, and she never once thought of them as evidence. She thought of them as odd. In her office on the North Curve, Vanessa stood in front of the wall calendar with a red marker and circled November 1st, then stood looking at it for a while before she capped the pen. The survey came in the first week of October. The county was unambiguous when he requested a determination in writing. The survey had not been submitted for approval, carried no legal effect, and could not alter a recorded deed. It was functionally an expensive drawing. Vanessa's purchase offer arrived 4 days later at roughly a quarter of the parcel's market value, described in the cover letter as a final opportunity. Elijah's response was 1 sentence. "You can't seize what was never yours." The camera at his gate caught her at 11 at night on the 9th of October. She stood in the lane looking directly into the lens for several seconds, close enough that the wide angle held every feature of her face in focus, and then raised a can and sprayed the housing black. The envelope came the next morning with no return address, no postmark, and no stamp. Inside was a photograph of his cabin taken from the road, and beneath it in printed capitals, "Old things have a way of disappearing in fires. He drove it to the sheriff's substation the same day and filed a report and watched the deputy write neighbor dispute on the intake form. Then he did the thing that would matter more than the report. He hired a licensed inspector out of Denver, no local connection, no association ties, and had him examine the wiring, the gas line, the smoke detectors, and the furnace. The man spent 6 hours in the house and produced a 14-page report, concluding that every system was sound and none showed evidence of degradation or fault. Elijah made 3 copies. One went to his attorney's office, one went into the safe deposit box at the bank beside Maya's drawings, one went up to the server out of state. He said nothing to anybody about why a man would spend $900 proving his own house was safe. Maya photographed the white pickup a second time on the 8th and a third time on the 18th. The general meeting on the 12th of October was the high point of Vanessa's confidence. She projected the survey on the screen at the front of the multi-purpose room with the folding chairs and walked the room through a boundary line that did not exist. She announced that the holdout parcel's owner now owed the association $18,400 in accrued penalties. She asked residents to make their feelings known to him directly. Then she brought up the renderings, the terrace, the pool, the west-facing overlook at sunset, and she gave the room a date. "We break ground on the 1st of November, she said. "The only thing standing between this community and its future is one selfish landowner who won't stop obstructing it." The room applauded. Not everyone. Enough. The board voted to support enforcement 7-2. Page signed the resolution as recording officer. Elijah did not attend. He heard it from Walter and then from Harold Gans, who called him at 10 that night and said for the record, and for whatever it was worth, that in his 11 years running that board, nobody had ever suggested the Carter parcel belonged to anyone but the Carters. Maya asked him that week whether they could just move. She said it while looking at the table, and she said it because she had run out of ways to protect him. He was being insulted in a room full of adults, and she could not stop it, and leaving was the only lever a 12-year-old had. He told her they would talk about it. The jamming started on the 14th. Both networked cameras, the replacement at the gate and the one on the barn corner, dropped signal between 11 and midnight and came back at almost the same minute 3 nights running. Not a power fault. Not weather. A radio problem in a narrow window, which meant a device, which meant a vehicle. So Elijah stopped relying on his network. He put a battery camera inside the hollow of the mailbox post, aimed down the access lane, and buried the wire so nothing showed. He wedged a second unit into a cleft in the rock outcrop above the service road, angled across the yard toward the shed. He set a motion-triggered audio recorder on a joist inside the shed itself. None of the 3 touched his house network. Each pushed to the out-of-state server on its own cellular channel the moment it recorded anything. That weekend, the weekend of the 15th, he packed. He boxed the wedding photograph, Rachel's letters, and the small wooden chair his father had built, and drove them to a climate-controlled storage unit 40 minutes away in Loveland, and paid 6 months in advance. Anyone watching would have said the man was preparing to surrender. He was preparing for the possibility that the woman across the road meant exactly what her envelope had said. Paige called him at 1:15 in the morning on the 17th. He did not recognize the number. Her voice was wrong from the first word, thin, fast, close to the phone. "She approved a purchase today," Paige said. "Out of the reserve. It's coded as landscaping supplies, and it isn't landscaping supplies." He asked what it was. She did not answer that. "I've signed everything," she said. "All of it is my signature." The line went dead before he could ask her anything else, and when he called back, it rang without an answer, and it kept ringing without an answer for the next 3 days. He sat on the edge of his bed in the dark and understood that the situation had changed shape entirely. It had never really been about the fence, and it was no longer about the land. A woman with a deadline had started buying things she did not want written down, and his daughter slept 20 feet away in a wooden house with one road out. Elijah was scheduled to attend the state judicial conference in Colorado Springs from the 19th through the 21st. He arranged for Maya to stay with his sister Deborah in Fort Collins, and he told her only that he had meetings and that Deborah had a better internet connection for her project. Maya, who was not stupid, looked at him for a moment too long and let it go. She left a drawing on the kitchen table folded once. The house, the two of them in front of it, the pines rendered as green triangles, the way she had drawn pines since she was 6. Underneath in blue marker, "I'll wait for you to come home." He put it in his jacket pocket instead of the drawer. What Vanessa bought in the second week of October, all of it charged to the association card that carried Paige Hollis's name, was as follows: 4 5-gallon fuel containers, a pair of heat-resistant gloves, a handheld signal jammer purchased through a marine electronics vendor, and a set of lock-breaking tools. Every line item was entered into the ledger under grounds and landscaping. A separate payment of $11,000 moved from a shell entity registered to a Denver address to a contractor who never appeared in any association record. Vanessa did not touch the card. She never held any of it. She wrote nothing, ordered nothing, and signed nothing. She tracked Elijah's departures instead, the mornings he left before 6, the Thursday he was gone until 9 at night, the conference dates published in a bar association newsletter that anyone could read. At the board meeting on the 18th, Elijah stood up during open comment and asked directly whether association funds had been used to commission a survey the county had already declared invalid. Vanessa did not answer him. She instructed the sergeant-at-arms, a maintenance supervisor with a lanyard, to escort him out. As he passed her chair, she said at conversational volume in a room that had gone quiet, "You can't protect that house forever." Walter Keene was sitting 4 seats away. He went home and wrote the sentence on the back of an envelope with the date and the time, because that was the kind of man he was, and because he had spent 30 years learning that the thing nobody writes down is the thing nobody can prove. He also noted in the same week that one of the association's white maintenance trucks had a heat shield working loose under the rear axle. It made a particular flat metallic knocking at low speed, distinct from every other vehicle on the ridge, and it had been getting worse. Elijah left the conference on the evening of the 20th, a day early. He could not have explained it afterward, except to say that he had been checking his phone every 20 minutes, and had finally stopped pretending he was listening to the panel on sentencing reform. He came over the ridge on the county road at midnight and saw the sky above the tree line glowing orange. He did not remember the last mile. The cabin was fully involved by the time he could get near it. The heat pushed him back across his own gravel. 2 engines had arrived and men were working, but he could see in the way they were working that they had already decided what this was going to be, a defensive operation, keeping it off the trees, off the neighbors. The roof went while he was standing there. It did not fall dramatically. It sagged and folded inward along the ridgeline his father had set with his own hands, and took the second floor with it, and Maya's room went into the fire with the pencil marks on the kitchen doorframe, and every photograph he had not thought to carry out to a storage unit in Loveland. Vanessa was across the road. Every other neighbor on that stretch was in a bathrobe, out of breath, calling to each other. She was dressed. She stood with her arms folded and her face composed, and for 1 second before she saw him, Elijah watched her mouth move into something that was unmistakably a smile. Then she crossed to him and began to talk. The wiring in that house had been ancient. The association had warned him repeatedly in writing, and he had refused every inspection. This was what came of ignoring the standards that protected everyone. He looked at her for a while before he spoke. "Why were you here before the fire trucks?" She said she had been doing a late drive through the neighborhood. She said it smoothly, and she did not look away when she said it, and that was the part he would think about later. He called Maya at 7 the next morning on video, standing with his back to what was left, so that she would see only sky and the top of a pine. She asked about her room. He held the phone steady and did not answer for a moment. "Our house is still here," he said, "as long as you and I are together." She cried, and he talked her through it, and Deborah came into the frame and took the phone, and when the call ended, he turned around and faced the black, wet ruin of the place he had grown up in and let himself cry for the first time in 6 years. The fire investigator found 2 separate points of origin, one in the hall closet at the center of the structure, one along the exterior wall where the shed corridor met the house. He also found a steel document box in the debris field, near where the office had been, its lid pried outward at the seam, opened before the fire reached it. Whoever had gone in had been looking for the deed. The association's letter arrived on the 22nd. Debris removal within 7 days, $2,000 per day thereafter, and appended a revised purchase offer lower than the last one because the improvements no longer existed. Vanessa came to the property line herself on the 23rd and stood outside the tape and told him he was holding nothing but ash now and that a father in his position ought to think about his daughter and sign. "You burned the wrong thing," Elijah said. "The evidence was never in the house." He believed it when he said it. He was less sure by the end of that week. What came off the server was this. The rock-cleft camera had recorded a figure in an association jacket carrying a fuel container from the service road to the shed at 11:22, one person hood-up face never toward the lens. Build and height could have been Paige Hollis. It could as easily have been Vanessa Crowell. The shed recorder had captured a woman's voice wind-torn and clipped in which the words hallway and electrical were audible, and the sentence containing them was not. The state lab's comparison came back as cannot exclude Vanessa Crowell precisely correct and precisely worthless in front of a jury. The mailbox camera had the association truck entering the lane at 11:18 and leaving at 11:43. Vanessa's call to dispatch was logged at 11:51. Her own house stood 200 yards away, so her phone had been near the scene all night along with everyone else's on that curve. The inspection report held. Nobody was going to sell an electrical fire. Colton Reeves, the fire investigator, gave him a preliminary read on the 25th. There was enough to charge Paige Hollis with arson. There was not enough yet to touch Vanessa Crowell. Elijah walked the burn afterward and bent down and picked up the cast metal house number from the mud scorched along one edge, the digits still legible. The worst part of losing a house is not the moment it stops existing. It is learning that another person believed they had the right to decide what your family got to keep. Standing there with that piece of metal in his hand, he understood that he was no longer defending walls. He was defending his daughter's right to grow up without believing that whoever is strong enough can simply take. Colton Reeves worked the burn for 9 days after that. He recovered accelerant residue at both origin points in a pattern no electrical fault produces. He recovered fragments of a molded plastic fuel container with the manufacturer's identification block ground away. The shed door had been forced from the outside, the hasp bent outward, the screws still seated in the wood they had been torn through. Renee Dalton came up from the State Attorney General's office in the second week. Her interest was not the fire. It was a reserve fund that had paid for a survey the county had already voided an $11,000 transfer to a contractor who appeared nowhere in the association's records, and a shell entity in Denver whose registered agent shared a mailing address with Vanessa Crowell's personal accountant. Nolan Price was appointed special prosecutor by the state, not the county. For one reason, the victim was the chief judge of the district, and nobody wanted the word influence anywhere near the file, which left Elijah in the strangest position of his career. He handed over the server credentials, the inspection report, the 12 manila folders, and Maya's phone. He gave a witness statement in a conference room and answered a detective's question about whether he had enemies without a trace of irony. Then he stopped. He did not call Nolan Price. He did not ask for status updates. He did not walk down one floor in his own courthouse to find out what had been filed. Dean Whitaker found him in the third week in the coffee shop across from the county building. Whitaker had been on the bench for 22 years, had known Elijah since Larimer, and had the face of a man who had already decided what he was going to say. He talked around it for a while, and then he stopped talking around it. "I golf with Warren Kelso," Whitaker said. "The warrant paperwork on that association is going to sit in a queue for 2 weeks because everything sits in a queue for 2 weeks. One phone call and it's on somebody's desk in 48 hours. Nobody's asking anybody to break a rule, Elijah. It's a scheduling conversation." Elijah turned his cup a quarter turn on the saucer and did not answer for a while. He was thinking about his daughter who was sleeping on a fold-out couch in Fort Collins and asking twice a week when she could come home. "If I do that," he said finally, "she gets one true thing to say about me. For the rest of my life, she gets to stand in front of a camera and say the judge put his thumb on it. I'm not giving her that." Whitaker looked at him for a moment, then nodded slowly and let it go and paid for both coffees on his way out. It was the closest Elijah came to losing, and nobody ever knew it happened. The association's emergency petition was filed on the 7th of November. It asked the district court to declare the burned parcel a public hazard, place it under association control, pending abatement, and authorize the board to contract remediation at the owner's expense, which, given $18,400 in penalties and $2,000 a day accruing, meant a forced sale within 90 days. Vanessa had told her attorney the man could not even produce a deed anymore, that it had burned with everything else, and the attorney had explained to her that recorded instruments live at the clerk's office, and that a certified copy takes about 20 minutes to obtain. She had been briefly visibly annoyed by this, as though the county had done something underhanded. Emergency petitions in Silver Ridge County go to the assignment docket, and the assignment docket belongs to the chief judge. The gallery was full. Word had gotten around the ridge, and 2 reporters from the Valley paper had taken seats near the aisle. Vanessa sat at counsel table in a charcoal suit with her folder squared in front of her, and she was by any objective measure about to win. The door behind the bench opened. Elijah Carter came through it in a black robe, and the clerk said the words, and the entire room stood up. Vanessa stood because everyone stood. It took her perhaps 4 full seconds to understand what she was looking at, and in that time her folder slid off the edge of the table and hit the floor, and she did not bend to pick it up. He gave her nothing. No look, no acknowledgement, no pause for effect. He sat and he spoke to the record. Before this court takes any action, it will state the following. The parcel described in this petition is owned by me. The structure referenced in this petition was my home. I am the complaining witness in an open arson investigation involving the petitioner. I have no business anywhere near the merits of this case. He recused himself in the next sentence on the record and ordered the file transferred to a visiting judge from Chaffee County. Then, before he left the bench, he did the one thing he was still permitted to do. This court issues a litigation hold. All parties and their agents, including the Westbriar Estates Homeowners Association and its board, shall preserve every document, communication, financial record, and electronic device relating to this parcel, its boundaries, and its structures from the 1st of January forward. No deletion of electronic mail, no disposal of hardware. This order makes no finding about any person. It says only that nothing disappears. He tapped the gavel once and stood. Vanessa was not looking at the robe. She was looking at nothing at all, somewhere past the bench, and what was moving behind her eyes was her own voice in a room full of neighbors saying, "I looked him up." The warrant came down 11 days later, signed by the visiting judge, and it was served during the association's own board meeting. Renee Dalton and 2 state investigators walked into the multi-purpose room with the folding chairs and took the desktop computer from the office, the file server from the utility closet, both ledger books and the board's tablet. Vanessa stood up and walked toward the side exit and was met there by a deputy with a subpoena for her personal phone, which she surrendered after a conversation she clearly expected to win. Paige Hollis sat in her chair through all of it with her hands flat on the table, shaking. The forensic examiner recovered a deleted folder from the association server 4 days after that in a partition that had been emptied but not overwritten. The folder was named Project Ashland. Inside was a 7-step outline written as a project plan with headings. Apply escalating penalty pressure. Establish alternative boundary documentation. Remove the structure. Petition for hazard designation. Acquire at post-loss valuation. Fund acquisition through association reserve. Commence clubhouse construction. In the same folder in the same partition was a press release. It said the fire had been caused by outdated wiring in an aging structure, and that the association had repeatedly warned the owner about the condition of his electrical system. It was drafted, formatted, and ready to distribute. The document's creation date was the 9th of October. The house burned on the 20th. Renee Dalton pulled the Bridgeline development contract from the seized ledgers and set it beside the fire report. Groundbreaking was contractually required by the 1st of November. The deposit, $62,000 drawn from the reserve, was forfeit if the date was missed. The association's annual audit was scheduled for the 11th of December. The motive now had a calendar, but it did not yet have a hand. Because when Renee traced every purchase, the 4 fuel containers, the heat-resistant gloves, the marine signal jammer, the lock tools, the survey firm, the shell entity transfer, every single authorization carried the same signature, Paige Hollis, 23 times. Vanessa's attorney filed a defense theory on the 2nd of December, and it was the theory the file had been built to support that the association's treasurer had acted alone in panic over financial exposure she herself had created, and that the president had trusted her subordinate too completely. Nolan Price brought Paige into a conference room and put the invoices on the table one at a time. He did not argue with her. He turned pages and let her look at her own handwriting. She held out for about 40 minutes, and then she asked for a lawyer, and 11 days later she took a plea. She admitted to purchasing the materials. She admitted to driving. She admitted to falsifying line items in the ledger as landscaping expenditures. She admitted to reporting Elijah Carter's travel schedule, which she had assembled from the Bar Association newsletter and from watching his driveway. She described the night itself in flat, exact sentences. She had carried the first container from the truck to the base of the exterior wall and set it down where she was told to set it down, and she had carried the second one to the hall window, and then she had gone back to the vehicle because she was told to go back to the vehicle. Vanessa poured both. Vanessa was holding the lighter. Paige had been sitting in the driver's seat with the door open when the wall went up. Then at the end of the session, with the recorder still running and nobody asking her anything, she said one more thing. She kept something, so I'd stay quiet. She called it insurance. The safe was in the office closet of the Crowell house, bolted through the floor 11 inches high. There was no money in it. There was one item, a memory card sealed inside a small fireproof document pouch. The pouch was the detail that stopped Renee Dalton cold, because a person does not fireproof something they intend to forget about. The card came out of a dash camera. Vanessa had put dash cameras in every association vehicle within a month of taking office. The maintenance crews had complained about it for a year, and Walter Keene could name the week they went in because she wanted to know what her staff did with their hours. The units she bought were dual-channel one lens through the windshield, one lens facing back into the cab, because a president who wants to know what her staff does with their hours wants to see the staff, not the road. On the night of the 20th of October, she had pulled that card out of the white maintenance truck and locked it in her safe. She had reviewed the forward channel first, and it gave her precisely what she was after: Paige Hollis crossing in front of the hood at 11:19 with a fuel container in each hand, lit from below by the parking lamps unmistakable. That was the leash. That was the insurance. She closed the laptop and put the card in the pouch and never opened the second channel at all. The interior lens had kept recording the whole time. It showed the cab from above the mirror. Paige in the driver's seat, Vanessa in the passenger seat, both women pulling on gloves. It showed Vanessa reaching into the footwell for something small and slipping it into her coat pocket. It showed both doors open and Vanessa stepping out with her. It showed Vanessa returning alone at 11:31, stripping the gloves off finger by finger and looking at her watch while the light through the windshield changed color behind her, and the audio recorded 18 inches from her mouth in a closed cab with the engine off, was not wind-torn and did not require a laboratory and did not come back as cannot exclude anything. By morning, he'll be begging us to buy this pile of ash off him. The shed recorder had never been able to give them a sentence. This gave them a face, a sentence, and an intention in one continuous unedited file with an embedded timestamp. The instrument Vanessa Crowell had installed to control other people turned out to be the only thing in the world capable of convicting her, and she had sealed it in a fireproof pouch with her own hands and locked it in her own floor. The criminal trial opened in March. Elijah testified on the 4th day in a gray suit with no robe and no title used in front of the jury beyond the one word the prosecution needed for foundation. He talked about a cabin his father built over 2 summers. He talked about a door frame with pencil marks on it, and the fact that he had written the date beside each one. He described the letter that told 400 neighbors his property was unsafe to enter alone, and the boy at school who asked his daughter whether her father was a criminal and the night she carried a box of drawings down to the kitchen table and refused to put it back. He described watching the roof fold along the ridgeline. Vanessa's attorney came at him from 3 directions on cross and lost all 3. The first was Paige, a cooperating witness with a plea agreement, the attorney said, who had rewritten her story to save herself and whose testimony was therefore worth nothing. Nolan Price had never needed Paige. He put in the fuel receipts and the jammer purchase. He put in the soil samples taken from the undercarriage of the white truck, matching the composition of the service road above the outcrop. He put in the Project Ashland folder and the press release with a creation date 11 days before the fire, and the Bridgeline contract with its November 1st deadline, and the dash camera file. He put in the 14-page inspection report from Denver, which established that the wiring in that house had been sound 6 weeks before the press release said it had failed. He put in the gate camera video from the 9th of October, Vanessa Crowell's face in full focus, looking into the lens for 4.5 seconds before she raised the spray can and the envelope that arrived the following morning with no postmark and the sentence printed on it about old things and fires. He put in a photograph of a heat shield hanging loose beneath a rear axle, which a fleet technician confirmed produced exactly the flat metallic knock a retired electrical technician had described from his front porch 3 weeks before anything burned, and he put in the back of an envelope on which that same technician had written, "You can't protect that house forever," with the date and the time in the corner. And 3 photographs dated the 28th of September and the 8th and 18th of October of a white pickup parked at the end of a service road with a person sitting inside it who never got out. All 3 taken through a window by a 12-year-old girl who thought it was strange. The second direction was Elijah himself. "You used your office to destroy my client. You sat on the bench in her case. I recused myself the moment I saw my own name in the file," Elijah said. "Your client is not in front of this jury because I am a judge. She is here because of what she chose to do." The third was desperation, that the fire had been an impulsive act by a woman under financial pressure who had lost control of a situation, not a plan. Nolan Price answered that one with a recording pulled off the phone Vanessa had surrendered under subpoena. She had made the call at 8:40 in the morning on the 21st of October, 9 hours after the fire, to a board member who had voted with her. "The land is practically ours." The revised purchase offer did not reach Elijah Carter until the 22nd. Motive plan execution and profit closed end to end. The jury was out for 6 hours. They convicted Vanessa Crowell of conspiracy to commit arson, first-degree arson, criminal mischief, forgery, theft from a non-profit corporation, tampering with physical evidence, and reckless endangerment. She was permitted to speak before the court set sentencing. She did not apologize. She did not look at Elijah, who was sitting in the 3rd row of the gallery in the same gray suit, or at Paige, who was not in the room. She spoke to the judge from Chaffee County as though he had simply failed to grasp a set of facts. "I had already put down the deposit," she said. "I made a commitment to 400 families. None of this would have happened if he had just agreed to sell." She was not lying. That was the part of it Elijah kept turning over afterward, driving north on the county road with the window down. She had said the truest thing she knew. She had genuinely believed that a promise she made to a community outweighed the deed of a man who never asked to be part of it, and that once she had spent money she could not get back. His refusal became the crime, and everything after it became his fault.